Once upon a time, there was a young man named Guy. This guy was a simple one. He didn't want for much, but was a hard worker regardless. He ran himself ragged, laboring through multiple jobs at the same time, some more legitimate than others. Guy's entire life was spent working, so this wasn't much of a problem. He enjoyed the process of work, of making his own money and forging his own path. He reveled in his freedom, and having come out of a dark pit best left to memory, he found joy in his routine simplicity. His issue lay in the constant pressure to seek out more, to seek an education. Eventually, he relented, so education he sought. All his work, all of his hard-earned gold went into this endeavor. He packed what few belongings he had and moved cities to seek out a higher education at an academy. He hated every second of it from the start, as he knew he would, but he still tried to keep his sunny disposition. Those high stone walls and colorful banners hung so proudly and invitingly, but all he could see were the people that were there, all moving so slowly as if they weren't present. Even in his simple life, in his simple apartment with his simple pleasures, they all seemed luxurious compared to this educational purgatory he found himself in. School, day in and day out, stress and anxiety, studies for things he didn't care for or didn't understand. Despite all of his pains, he pushed through. Good grades across the board. That was until one year he finally cracked. All that pressure that had been building up inside of him finally pushed him over the edge that he'd been riding for far too long. His exercise was replaced with partying. Many nights he'd wake up in beds that weren't his, in poor companionship, or on the steps of a tavern. His morning brew was now a tall glass of alcohol. And for what? For this? Seeking out education in something he had no interest in? Why shouldn't he enjoy himself, he thought. One drink, another after that, just one more glass. One night there was a glass too many. His story nearly ended that night. The next morning came, and the one after. No more drinks, no more studies, just the quiet suffering of a human candle burning at both ends, and in desperate need of water. Guy blinked and half a year was gone. 6 months of a near comatose. This was one of the lowest points. He sought help, asking friends for aid. They only offered him more drink. That tempting glass in hand beckoned to him so warmly, to be merry despite it all. But he tossed that drink over the side of a bridge and sought out a proper apothecarian, a healer. He had hope. He had drive to improve and to be better. But all they had were empty words, clinical questions, papers to fill, and his pockets to empty. Eventually they relented and offered Guy the medicine that he required. Thought he required. He took them as instructed and things were fine for a few months. He wasn't sad. He was able to manage getting out of his bed and making his way between his classes. He grew distant from the many friends he'd made. All that remained between his studies was nights of temporary passion. Days, if the time permitted it. He knew it was wrong, but he didn't care. He didn't feel anything. Then, as the year drew to a close and the next began, he had an epiphany. He had blinked. Another 4 months had passed and he could barely recognize himself. The medicine, he wasn't sad anymore, yes, but he wasn't happy either. Or any other emotion for that matter. Discontented, he stopped taking the bitter medicines prescribed to him. Things only grew worse as their numbing effects began to subside. The anxiety, the frustration, the constant state of confusion, of discontent, then that old friend knocking on the door again. Depression. Guy knew them well, and the two had managed to get along for a while. They had their spats, their back and forths, but they gave each other distance. However, this year, depression decided to move in full time. It happened again, that tempting glass overflowing with regret. Work was getting done, but it was as hollow as he was. Thankfully, he didn't sink deeper this time. Guy learned well of the dangers of the path he was stumbling his way through. He needed to leave the academy and return home to the city he was from. But he had nothing left to give. Empty pockets. Taking out loans from the treasury, he prepared to return at any cost. He couldn't stay here any longer. Then, a great plague struck the world just as he was preparing for his departure. Everything turned on its head. But free of the academy and its claustrophobic corridors, he made plans to work from his new dwelling, a shoddy building he shared with some of his old drinking mates. He started to write and to act for others and their entertainment. Little things at first to help his old friends rest and get through their struggles. But as word of his work spread, he began down a long path. He loved it, his newfound passion, the satisfaction, the routine. Even though he seldom slept and the pay wasn't even enough to put more than a few grains of rice in his belly, he spent every day working away, joyfully letting his mind wander and create stories for people to find comfort in, or at least satisfaction of some kind. Years passed. He had started working with another guy named Jagg Offman. Jagg Off, as he was called, was the representative of a guild of those in the same line of work as Guy. For the first time, thanks to the support of those that had been with him on his journey through all the perils and misfortunes, he felt he could accomplish something and seek out more than survival. Comforts soon re-entered his life. Drinks, in moderation. The ability to put food on the table. The oil in the lanterns hadn't run dry in weeks. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, his pockets weren't empty. Not completely. Then finally, he had made his crowning accomplishment. 100,000 angels, as Guy called them, now followed him and his words. Guy was elated. He now found joy and passion as well as profit in his work. He could live. He could work with this and maybe someday return to the big city. The world was mending as the plague subsided. He made friends. He made enemies. But most importantly, he made merry, finding his simple purpose again, to tell stories and to share his passion. Jagg rewarded Guy with kind words and support from the guild. Nothing could stop Guy from building a life for himself now. A good, honest life. He was leaving his old friend behind. No medicines, no more thoughts of closing the book and writing the end of his story. A final chapter. Then at the peak, as he finally reached his goal, a humble but ample amount from Jagg's guild, they burned it. They burned all of Guy's work. Years of progress tossed to the wayside without thought or care. They cited their tanglewood of rules and regulations. Jagg Off himself, that rat, fled every time Guy sought to ask what he'd done wrong and how he could make amends. There was no stopping it. Everything was gone in the span of a short nap. Guy had been through this before, deep in the pits, and now he realized that he didn't need that Jagg Off. That Jagg Off needed him. The loathsome leech, the parasite he was. I decided to say, fuck you, Jagg Off, and start fresh. They burned me. They tried to kill my art, disregard my passion, betray my trust, and spit in my face. But thanks to those that have supported me through everything, through the good times and the bad, whether through kind words, through helping put soup in my belly and a smile on my face, hell, through just enjoying my craft. The stories I tell and the path of passion I wish to share, thanks to all of you, Guy is going to keep on keeping on. And no Jagg Off is ever going to kill my art. Fuck you, Jagg Off. We've been through worse. The friends I have now won't let me fall back into that pit, no matter how hard you try. And just in case you hadn't forgotten about this guy, just know that he won't forget what you've done. Don't worry, Jagg Off. We'll play along. Be part of the guild, but know that never again will we be wronged. Never again will you burn our art and discard our passions without a second thought. You parasitic fuck. Ah, and lest I forget. Fuck you, Jagg Off.